Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the LAOT Podcast. I'm Arnav Mathur, and today we turn to three questions that are reshaping what it means to practice law in India. How the next generation of lawyers are being trained to work alongside artificial intelligence, whether the legal profession can be trusted to regulate the use of these tools, and what happens when the court steps in and finally tries to make hard rules for all of it. Here's what has happened so far. On June 3rd, 2026, the Supreme Court's Artificial Intelligence Committee, reconstituted by Chief Justice Surya Kant, published its draft Regulations for Use of Artificial Intelligence in Court 2026. This was the first attempt by the Indian judiciary to regulate AI. It covers what the courts can use AI for generally, what it can never use AI for, who approves it, and what happens when things go wrong. Now, before the deadline for consultation even ended, on July 2, a bench of Justice P.S. Narasimha and Alok Arade set aside orders of the NCLAT and NCLT in Pooja Ramesh Singh versus Jammu and Kashmir Bank. They discovered that three of the six precedents that the tribunals had relied on did not exist at all, and three others had been misattributed. The court called for zero tolerance and directed the Bar Council of India to constitute a committee to discuss this issue. It's some way a sequel to what we discussed in April with Anya Batra. There's also another angle to the discussion, which is that we have law schools and law firms already reimagining how young lawyers are trained, largely without waiting for any regulator to come and tell them how to do it. Now, to think through all of this, we are joined by Mustafa Rajkotwala. Mustafa is a lawyer and a senior legal engineer on the founding team of NYAI. NYAI is India's first compliance-first legal AI platform built to really sit between a law firm or a company and the large language models that they rely on. It runs on custom legal models trained on millions of Indian legal documents, and every answer comes back with, of course, verified citations. The vision for this entire organization is quite simple. It's to bring AI-backed rigor to legal work that no human team could ever do. Mustafa, of course, practiced at Khaitan and Company before joining NYAI, and he's our lovely Nalsar alumnus as well. Mustafa, thank you so much for being here and joining us today.
Thank you, Arnav, for having me. And I must say it's a full circle for me because I used to also be part of the LAOT editorial board back when I was at Nalsar. So I'm really happy to be invited here.
Thank you so much. So let's start with legal education, because I think in the whole AI conversation, this is not something that's discussed very often. So the Bar Council's legal education rules were framed back in 2008, and they don't say anything specific about artificial intelligence or digital literacy. A handful of these top law schools have built their own AI centers, their own electives, but that's largely their own initiative. What do you think it would take structurally for AI literacy to become part of mainstream LLB curriculum? And what does this curriculum even look like? And do we need it?
Okay, so before I answer this, it's sort of worth understanding where the world already has reached with
Yeah.
AI in the legal profession. And we also need to acknowledge the fact that we are a little late in this journey, especially in terms of imbibing AI as part of our legal education structure. Uh, Obviously, the legal practice globally has moved very fast now. We are seeing American Bar Association reports saying that around 40% plus large law firms have lawyers who are depending on AI. 18% plus solo practitioners are now using AI tools. So, I mean, the profession has gotten set there, obviously across US, EU, the APAC, legal AI has become a very common thing and a more sort of sought after thing in the legal profession. And obviously now the law universities and law schools have followed suit uh,
Yeah.
on a global scale.
Mm.
Uh, we are seeing universities such as Suffolk and Washington University, King's College, NUS, etc., who have already either imbibed AI tools as part of their regular legal education that they provide, or
Yeah.
they have set AI policies, AI strategies as to how to imbibe legal education with the existing curriculum. A very recent one which came out was the University of Chicago's
Mm.
policy, where they've also introduced a 1-year ban on devices in classrooms, which we'll talk about
Yeah.
as I want to address this question of yours. But they have made a policy which not only gives this ban, but also then eventually gives a structure as to how AI has to be imbibed with students when they are going to be moving ahead as part of
Yeah.
their course years on campus. Uh, so when we take all of these learnings and bring it to India, what we need to sort of also understand is that our legal education system is sort of fragmented in two sections. One
Mm.
has your elite law schools, the NLUs, the private funded universities, which can set these AI electives, these AI centers, research centers up. But at the same time, you do have the 1600 to 1700 plus law colleges, law universities across the country, which are affiliated to state boards,
Mm.
and they do not have that kind of backing, either in terms of resources or in terms of opportunities
Mm.
for setting up such initiatives. So, what do such universities do? I'm talking about the entire umbrella, and then I talk about these 1700 plus law colleges.
Yeah.
All of us, we rely on what the BCI does in terms of mandates. You
Yeah.
correctly mentioned the 2008 legal education rules, and
Yeah.
that talks only about mandating computer education and nothing apart from that.
Correct.
And what we recently had in terms of a development was a 2024 circular, which the
Right.
uh, BCI had circulated, where they encouraged law colleges to include subjects such as blockchain, e-discovery,
Yeah.
bioethics, AI, among others. So that was that. Obviously, the law schools, the elite law schools have followed suit, and they have started setting up their electives, their guest
Yeah.
lectures, their research labs. They have started doing hackathons now.
Mm.
They are teaching students how to build AI tools, etc., as initiatives. But the large chunk of our law schools are completely left siloed.
Come on.
So they are only relying on what the BCI says here. And since they are encouraging these subjects, what we are getting now as a phenomenon is AI and law being one of those course those course subjects that have to be completed, like how
Yeah.
cyber laws or data protection laws are looked at. So it's just theoretical on paper. Few marks worth of questions would come in an exam, and
Mm.
you complete that, and you have done your bit.
Yeah.
But that's not how we can envision AI focused legal education and legal sort of focused literacy, as you
Mm.
mentioned in the question.
Yeah.
We have to start including AI structurally in the work we do.
Mm.
And how can that possibly happen in today's time? Obviously, access is a big question, as you correctly mentioned.
Yeah.
Uh, but what apart from that, even if you give access to all students at the same time across the board,
Mm.
it's there is this Matthew effect which
Mm.
gets discussed very often, where those who already they already have a launchpad on certain things, they are
Mm.
going to perform significantly better with the same resources given vis-a-vis those who do not have those same launchpads and
Correct. The
opportunities. So
divide just continues in different terms.
definitely. So, just providing unequivocal access to an AI tool, or just making students ready to use AI platforms is not where we can start with. But obviously, how we critically make students understand how they have to work with AI in the future is the way to go about. So obviously, it has to start from the grassroots level. You start having discussions from year one itself as to how to critically work
Yeah.
with a tool, principles such as confidentiality, how you work with verifying an answer being right or wrong,
Yeah.
how you work with a concept like how you would want to look at an audit trail of an answer before
Mm.
you trust the answer. You look for the correct citation,
Yeah.
how you can look through AI slop. I mean, it's not it's becoming a skill in today's time where you need to understand how to look through confident nonsense which the AI publishes
Yeah.
versus what is actual relevant legal information for us. So these skills have to start from a grassroots level, and how can that also happen? If you would ask me, is not by again just giving unequivocal access or just pushing it or shoving it down in the curriculum, but it has to start from training the faculty to be prepared to
Yeah.
take such courses up. You get more industry experts involved in the entire process for
Mm.
the BCI. Obviously right now, because of what the Supreme Court recently said, there is a new draft advocates bill coming up
Yes.
which talks about creating a national legal academy where technology focused training is a very important thing, and
Mm.
that draft talks about it. Obviously, I think the consultation just ended yesterday, so
Yeah.
it's going to be a development that we have to see what happens now. But
Mm.
definitely, BCI mandated initiatives will be a starting point. And
Mm.
obviously, we need to have more industry experts involved, more technical expertise, and how we think about legal education in today's time, because
Yeah.
AI is already here. It's not going to come. It's
Absolutely.
not. It's not the future anymore. It is the present, and
Yeah.
it's just going to be shaping the future in a different way, in ways which you and I can predict most parts of it. Some parts of it we cannot. So
Correct.
it's a step by step process. So this draft advocates bill talking about a national legal academy which
Mm.
would be mandating such kind of technical training that should have
Mm.
a more AI focused approach.
Yeah.
You also do have a lot of government initiatives where there are these educational portals
Mm.
where you know young learners are given access to modules of around technology, around digital cyber laws, etc. So those kinds of initiatives need to be amped up.
Mm.
And I mean, once you train the faculty, you bring the industry experts in, then you will be able to move one step ahead and shape how the students think
Yeah.
about AI first education. So I think it's a structural process.
Mm.
Just one BCI mandate or just one change in the law is not going to be enough. It's going to be a
Yeah.
gradual process, but it has to happen at a more rapid pace now. And
Mm.
also, it's not only regulator centered, because
Yeah.
obviously the couple of universities that I mentioned right now out here, they are not doing this because of a particular law mandating them to do the same, but
Correct.
it's because because the legal training has to happen in a way to make students prepared for the future.
Yeah.
So that has to be imbibed in that kind of a thought process. So that approach has to be imbibed in our legal education as well. And I'm keeping the elite universities aside because I'm pretty sure that that understanding and approach has entered the NLU space,
Absolutely.
has entered the private university space where they want to make the students more AI ready.
Yeah.
But what I'm trying to talk about here is to bridge the gap as well with
Yeah.
the other law schools, which is the larger chunk, which makes the larger chunk of the profession, so
Yeah.
that the gap can be bridged, and obviously we can have a more AI focused legal education system as we move
Mm.
ahead.
Absolutely. That was a very comprehensive answer, and the starting point itself of recognizing that there is a gap between legal education of what a law student can get in one university versus the other. Once we recognize that gap and then we start building to address that gap, not just in terms of access, but in terms of what the practical output is going to be. So you have
Exactly.
courses that are not just theoretical or just a mandate, but also teach you from the first year of how to use an AI tool. I had a small follow-up question on this particular your answer, which is you discussed about how the Chicago Law School, I think, had a ban on devices, right? This
Yeah.
is something it comes up quite often where you have certain professors or certain people in the industry who are like, don't use AI, don't use any devices. Get a paper and pen if you're coming to my class. And, I will reject everything that comes from AI. I can read and I can tell if this is AI generated, stuff like that. How do you respond to that? Do you think that that's being too nostalgic in some sense and sticking by the old rules when the world's changing? And is there some merit to that argument saying that no, you won't be able to learn anything in law school if you were completely reliant on these artificial intelligence tools? How do you respond to that?
See, my very immediate response to a proposition like this is
Yeah,
very simple, that uh, just because a certain technological advancement was not there 30 years ago, it doesn't mean we're not using it now. Pretty
yeah,
simple example. Uh, our professors used to refer to their cases from the AIR digests which were present
yeah,
in the libraries. They would sit and they would manually scan, look for a particular citation, a case law, read the
yeah,
ratio, look for a dissenting opinion manually.
mm,
Now, the day we entered law school, and at least I'm talking about myself,
yeah,
uh, as you brought up the nostalgia point, that we started working immediately with legal research tools,
yeah,
where we could just put in the case law name on the website and it would generate not only that one case, but also connecting cases alongside that. So there are service providers as such which
yeah,
came into the system, digitized the process, and not only private but also the public ecosystem. You have
mm,
the e-courts websites, etc. So I'm just trying to give you this simple example that how things have evolved and we have normalized that.
yeah,
Doesn't mean that because of the fact that I'm reading the case law from um, the Supreme Court's e-courts website,
yeah,
and I'm reading it from a book with a paper and pen in my hand, my critical skills are getting impacted.
mm,
It's my As a lawyer, I need to understand how I am going to figure that judgment out and what I'm
yeah,
going to look for it, the gray spots which I have to look for. So,
mm,
back in the day, contracts were not done on Microsoft Word.
mm,
Now you're left, right, and center drafting on MS Word, typing, using your keyboard shortcuts, getting things done. So
yeah,
there are two responses to this kind of a proposition. One is that there is efficiency, obviously, which comes with technology, and that efficiency gives you the sort of launchpad to do things faster,
yeah,
get certain tasks done faster, keeping in mind that you are using it as an enabler to the
mm,
growth. And the second, I would say, is the fact that I mean, you are bridging a certain gap by
mm,
using AI as technology in today's time. It doesn't take away the fact that you will be critically thinking. And why I'm saying this, because of generative AI being the cause of problem here.
yeah,
The professor would say, you created a case law out of Gen AI and told me, but that might be wrong and right. So the critical skill of rejecting what is not correct, what the
yeah,
AI gives you versus what the actual correct things are, that still needs you to have your lawyering skill in place.
yeah,
If the AI chatbot just generates a case law for me, if I just ask it, tell me something about the essentials of a contract,
mm,
and I just blindly submit that to the teacher,
yeah,
I am not doing justice to my profession in the first place, or I'm
yeah,
not doing justice to my training as a lawyer in the first place. So
correct.
it's
And this
just
is
that.
what needs to be taught in law schools from first
Exactly,
argument.
exactly. So you cannot blame the technology or the technological advancement to be the evil
Yeah,
when you need to first ensure that you're using the technology correctly. If the
correct.
technology is used correctly, it's going to be a very big enabler.
Yeah,
Uh, I can tell the AI chatbot to summarize five judgments for me,
mm,
keeping the correct points in mind. So I'm able to pick the correct arguments up, and then I'm able to present that in a moot court competition that I go for.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think in today's time, this brings me back to why I mentioned to train the faculty as well, not
Yeah.
only to train them around how the technology works or how they should teach the students how the technology works, but
Yeah.
also this kind of approach that how AI has to be sort of calibrated with legal education. So that
Correct.
approach also comes along with the faculty training. So the
Hmm.
moment the faculty realizes that if used correctly, this technology or this AI enablement that is happening for my
Hmm.
students is going to make them think more creatively,
Hmm.
then I think their approach then will be in a more different way. They will then ask the students, that, okay, have you verified what you have seen?
Hmm.
What is the source where you're picking this particular answer from? What is your sort of what do you want to say as a rebuttal to what the AI has generated to you in terms of this argument? So
Hmm.
those are the things those skills will get developed so that
Yeah.
that gap gets bridged,
Yeah.
and you know you won't have this kind of a scenario coming up.
Correct.
So that's my response.
Understood. Thank you. Thank you so much for that response. I think the role of being a facilitator from both the student side and the faculty side is really important, and these skills need to be taught as soon as possible to law students because it's like you said, it's not a wave that's coming. It's not the future. AI is present. So let me move from the classroom to the first few years of practice. Now, firms are deploying AI at scale across all types of law firms. Traditional first few years of practice have been built around exactly this kind of grunt work where you do document review, site checking, drafting first memos, stuff like that. Now, these are also the tasks that AI is brilliant at automating and helping out with. So if artificial intelligence, continuously does that work, then how do you train a junior? A partner's worry would just be that okay, if my junior is so reliant on artificial intelligence, how what do I train her on, and how do I ensure that she's competent enough to rise up the ranks in a law firm?
Okay, so uh, I have a very a simple thing to say to this to begin with, and then obviously I
Yeah,
want to give you a more detailed response.
yeah,
One thing is that if the grunt work which a junior lawyer has to do is the measure of their intellect and their them being a good lawyer in the initial few years, then I think that's a wrong measure to hold them against. That's one thing. It's just that now because AI has been able to automate these tasks, which,
hmm,
as you correctly mentioned, make a first cut or summarize a large document, things of that nature.
yeah,
We are now equating that with a junior lawyer's work and measuring that against what they do very well, and we're
hmm,
limiting them to that.
hmm,
But if you want to be a good lawyer, obviously the traditional way of becoming a good lawyer from a junior to a senior lawyer was doing this grunt work alongside the critical thinking demands which a lawyer have to fulfill from the junior years itself. And then that osmosis would take place. I would read 300, 400 contracts. I would sit and summarize an entire file of petitions to make a flow of arguments as to what is happening across 10 years of judgments. And
hmm,
then in that process, I would understand, okay, how the judges have interpreted that particular law, which
yeah,
sections they've looked at, what are the arguments the petitioners have made, defendants have made, what stands as good law, bad law. So
hmm,
you are using grunt work as the means to the end,
yeah,
and then now AI comes in, so you are completely eliminating their role, limiting it to the grunt work. But
hmm,
I feel that and I see a contradiction in this thought as well, because at one end lawyers are skeptical of AI, and
yeah,
they're skeptical of any output which comes out generally. I'm saying this from how the profession at a large looks at AI.
yeah,
And at the same time now, since you've slowly started trusting AI for certain tasks, you
hmm,
are completely removing the human out of the loop.
Yeah.
thinking that okay, now it's fine, but at the same time you are not going to hold somebody, you're not going to hold the AI machine accountable tomorrow. If something goes wrong, you are going to point it
True.
back to a human. So
Yeah.
there are a lot of contradictions in this thought. So
Mm.
the straight and simple answer to this is that you start with a hybrid structure. I mean, just
Mm.
the way how a senior lawyer is imbibing AI in their practice,
Yeah.
uh, the junior does the same, but obviously you don't leave the junior open out
Mm.
in the blind. Obviously there has to be some sort of training and holding. Law firms do it when juniors enter the firm and enter the
Yeah.
system. There's a lot of training done in the initial months,
Yeah.
in terms of course modules, in terms of you know a lot of the CLEs that happen in firms for continued
Mm.
legal education initiatives. A
Mm.
lot of on ground tasks have been juniors are made to do
Mm.
alongside the work that they do on a daily basis, and that's how the training happens, and then they are left in the open a
Yeah.
few years down the road. So, and obviously, but this is what happens in these firms, again, a elite siloed space.
Yeah.
A lawyer's chamber, for example, or if you're working with a judge as a clerk, or you're working in an independent law office or a smaller outfit,
Yeah.
there is where this kind of grunt work osmosis happens, where the students learn. uh, the students who have now just turned into lawyers learn about how to work around the profession. But I think just generally, if the lawyers are changing their approach around AI, the
Mm.
same sort of expectation has to you have to settle with that with the junior
Mm.
lawyers as well. You just cannot completely either eliminate their role, or you cannot completely eliminate their value in the system just because certain tasks AI can do well. AI
Mm.
can do certain things well, but again, AI comes with the point that a human has to be in the loop
Yeah.
to verify, to be satisfied with what the AI machine is telling them.
Mm.
Then you go ahead and you send it out either to a client or to the court, etc. So there is a tiered process which
Yeah.
and no AI service provider in today's time, no public service provider who is pushing AI tools at you will
Mm.
ever want to take that risk in the first place, to
Yeah.
say that okay, you completely remove the humans out of it.
Yeah.
So let the same thing settle down with the junior lawyers. Let them take the tools in hand. Let them work, in tandem with it. Question the system, verify
Mm.
what is coming. But at the same time, the junior lawyers should not use AI and Gen AI specifically as an easy pass. That
Mm.
you make the first cut through the AI tool, you make the first cut of that memo, or the first cut of that contract, or the first cut of that particular draft that you to submit to court, and
Yeah.
just send that directly to the senior saying that okay, my job is done.
Yeah.
No. So the role and the work still remains, and this
Yeah.
goes across the chain. No
Mm.
senior lawyer will risk their reputation by doing this kind of an activity.
Absolutely.
So you hold the junior accountable to the same standard, that
Mm.
whatever comes out of your system has to be verified by law, has to have an authority backed by what you are saying,
Yeah.
and how you're reaching to that with the use of AI can be, you can trust the lawyer's judgment
Yeah.
on that. And if you're gonna not hold a senior lawyer by the collar, okay, oh, so many tasks of yours have been taken away by AI,
Yeah.
why hold the junior lawyer as well? So
Absolutely.
and I feel it's an enabler as well,
Mm.
to just sort of give a larger picture.
Mm.
The junior lawyers can learn faster now how the actual things happen in the profession.
Yeah.
You waste time sitting and reading 1,000 pages of briefs. You
Mm.
rather assist your senior in court
Yeah.
from the get-go. You understand how proceedings happen in front of a judge. You
Yeah.
understand how you have to work along with the entire courts ecosystem,
Mm.
starting from the registry up to the various other officers in court.
Yeah.
You get to learn those on ground learnings
Yeah.
much faster, and I think it should be looked at it in that way.
Understood. I think the best part is that grant work is not the measure of what a lawyer is supposed to do. It's much more than that. It's the critical thinking skills, that make up a lawyer, not just a junior lawyer, but any lawyer generally. And that can never be replaced. Human in the loop has been like the biggest word that's been used around every AI related conversation that happens. And what does human in loop mean? It essentially means that you use your cognitive skills to basically see if the output that AI is given is worth it, and if there are any changes to be made. And I also really like the point about osmosis. The idea that you would learn through doing all these repetitive tasks, but then if you can just automate it and learn it very quickly and then focus on something that you would not have the time to do as a junior lawyer earlier, I think that makes a lot of sense as well.
And I
I had
want
a
to add one more point, actually, Arnav, to the human in the loop, if I can.
Yeah.
Uh, Ours is, at the end of the day, as lawyers, ours is a very human centered profession, no
Yeah.
matter how much technology develops and becomes part of the ecosystem. And
Mm.
me being somebody who is working on the tech side of things, I'm still
Yeah.
saying this to you.
Yeah.
No client will be satisfied by an AI generated output
Mm.
or AI generated advice. And no court is also going to be satisfied by an AI generated petition submitted to them. So,
Mm.
and forget who's generating that particular legal document. Just the fact that a lawyer thinks for a client, thinks for the person they're representing, whose interest they're representing, and that commercial mindset, the
Mm.
mindset to advise the client correctly in the correct direction.
Yeah.
From a justice perspective, if a lawyer is working towards bringing justice to certain communities whom they're representing, for example, the lawyer will look through the law, use whatever machines they can, but at the end of the day, it is a human's interest that they are defending.
Yeah.
So no machine can do that, no matter how much. There is an emotional angle involved in the law as well. We
Mm.
know that very well. And the more we are dealing with AI on a daily basis, the more that is becoming a stronger thing in our field. That the human connection, the human touch,
Yeah.
the that cannot go away. So that is also very important learning for a junior lawyer as they are stepping in the profession.
And I'm also assuming that this is something that you feel will always be the case, because like we never expected, let's say 5-10 years ago, that there would be something called artificial intelligence that would disrupt our industries like this. So do you think that this sort of like coding with human connection or something, like, it sounds dystopian now, but I'm sure even AI sounded dystopian 10 years ago. So
Definitely,
since
definitely.
you're on the tech side of things, do you think that there's a future where more and more things get automated?
See, currently, we are seeing a new development in our profession, in our field, which is the rise of these AI native law firms.
Hmm.
And across the spectrum, either it be an outfit which is doing commercial work, or they are doing justice oriented work in the
Yeah.
law, or they're doing policy work as well. So I mean, in the near future, what I see is a rise of such concepts even more. And I'm calling this AI native law firm or AI native firm a concept because we're going to see variations of it. What is an AI native firm or an AI
Yeah.
native legal outfit? Basically, it's humans who are using technology, but it's technology first, and humans are verifying everything, and
Hmm.
it's going ahead. So it's starting with this efficiency model in mind, that okay, AI is doing a couple of tasks quickly, the humans are sitting behind that, controlling the machine,
Yeah.
pushing it ahead. So I think we're going to see a more rise of such kinds of outfits in the profession generally. I
Yeah.
am not saying that 10 years, 15 years down the line, uh, big chunks of our work streams are going to get completely eliminated by AI. It's not going to
Yeah.
happen because one thing is that AI generally, as a technology concept, is it is scaling rapidly across different
Yeah.
fields, different professions. But for a lawyer, I still feel that there. we spoke about the human connection, and I keep coming back to it because till the human in the field in the profession is not convinced enough that this technology is going to do something for me, they won't accept it. They'll reject it, or they'll be skeptical about its usage, or
Correct.
they'll be measured about its usage. So
Hmm.
I still see for the next at least for the next half a decade or so, we are going to be dabbling with various forms of AI, adoption of AI in our firms, in our legal offices, in our
Yeah.
small chambers, in the justice system at large, in our courts, etc.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a very gradual process, but I am not worried as such that it's going to
Hmm.
eat up chunks of the profession at all, because
Yeah.
it's going to be a gradual adoption. But how it's going to be is something interesting to see. An
Yeah.
AI native law firm, I brought that example up first, is something which we had not envisioned even 5 years, 10 years back, when AI was slowly coming in terms of a concept.
Yeah.
Nobody imagined that, okay, a few verticals of work will become automated in
Hmm.
terms of, and I'm talking about certain administrative law firm tasks
Hmm.
that, billing to a client, for example,
Yeah.
raising an invoice for the work done, sending the bill out, just that process where you're sitting and filling in your timesheet entries as to how many hours you've allotted to tasks that you've done, gathering all that up, sending it to the client, doing the correspondence there. Like that is actually a very legitimate vertical of work in a
Yeah.
law firm, and there
Yeah.
are people who do it on a regular basis, sitting with various stakeholders on the table. So
Hmm.
stuff like that, AI is assisting in to get done faster. So many such administrative tasks,
Yeah.
looking for new clients, doing market research. So
Hmm.
I'm talking about these ancillary tasks which these AI native firms are making the AI tools do.
Yeah.
And then what they're doing is that they're marrying it with with the actual legal work, where they have to sit with the machine, they have to sit with the client, solve their problems, and move ahead. So
Hmm.
for now, at least for the next half a decade or so, it's going to be us dabbling with various forms of AI in the profession.
Yeah.
Then, how rapidly the technology evolves is when we will see
Yeah.
if huge chunks of work are completely taken away or not. But
Hmm.
for now, I'm fairly optimistic for lawyers in general as well, that it's going to
Yeah.
be a very good value add to the
Hmm.
work we do, and it's only going to improve efficiency.
Understood. I think the whole idea of AI native law firm was quite interesting. Um, and staying on this point of law firms and the legal industry, I'm really curious about your trajectory as well. So you graduated from Nalsar and then you joined Khaitan, um, where you were in where you were advising on M&A, private equity, and TMT matters. You stayed there for I think about a couple of years, and then now you've moved to a legal startup. So could you just walk us through of like what made you make this decision? And also, if you think that this is symptomatic of a general shift in the legal industry, where more and more freshers out of law school or just with 2 years of PQE want to move to a legal startup and see a future there as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked this
Yeah.
question. And obviously, my motivation to move out of traditional law practice and to move into something innovative as
Yeah.
legal AI, came with a couple of motivations in my mind. Obviously, I didn't know back in college that I'm going to be doing this 5 years or 6 years down the line. I had the traditional corporate law path in my mind, and obviously I would think to do something differently once I would face the great corporate burnout
Yeah.
eventually in my life. That
Yeah.
was that was the thought when I had started law school and I started working. But then when I came across how AI has shaped things, and I won't call it only legal AI, but I'm calling it the legal tech umbrella, because
Mhm.
AI is one part of the vertical of work that you would see in a legal tech outfit.
Yeah.
There are a lot of other things also which form part of legal tech, but generally, a lawyer's role in such legal tech outfits is to bring a creative it's to bring a creative intersection of thoughts
Yeah.
on the table. So being in a law firm for several years, I understood how the processes work. And obviously, in a corporate law outfit, the work is very process, and it's structured in certain ways. There are hierarchies, there are ways in which tasks have to be done, and that's how the
mm,
general corporate structure is, and it has been transplanted in corporate law generally. So
mm.
it's easy to pick that pattern up once you have worked on you worked on several matters, you've understood how people are functioning.
Yeah.
What came to my mind when I decided to make this shift was that if there are certain technologies which can help ease these processes up,
Mm,
or if there are certain innovative solutions as a lawyer that I can help with
mm,
alongside technology focused folks, if I can
mm.
advise them or give them a thought as to how we can make solutions for lawyers to make their lives better, then I think it's a better sort of contribution made to the profession, rather than
Mm.
my vision of it, rather than just sitting on a desk and paper pushing.
Yeah.
It obviously the work that you do in a firm has a larger impact once you are able to close that deal or able to push that matter to the court and you're able to get a favorable hearing. So
Yeah.
not taking away any of the merits or any of the importance that the traditional law path holds
Yeah.
for lawyers, but there are there are innovative ways in which one can give back to the profession as well,
Mm,
and at the same time create a good contribution to the society as well, is by uh, working in the intersection.
mm.
So I don't think that the kind of role that I am doing right now is a new role in terms of on paper. It's not a new role because there have been
Mm.
lawyers in the past across time that have done such moves.
Yeah.
It's just that this kind of a shift was not glorified back in the past,
Mm.
or it was not given that much of mainstream attention.
Yeah.
Now, because AI has become not only the hype word, the buzzword, but also its uses and its benefits are being felt by the profession, people are starting to realize that okay, it is something which is it's something which is path breaking suddenly, which has come out. It's
Mm.
not that case. It's been there since several decades, and it's gotten up shape very recently.
Yeah.
So these kinds of roles were there before. They have taken up a new shape in today's time because the possibilities that AI has in terms of creating solutions for
Mm.
lawyers and for the profession at large have increased. You
Yeah.
can completely, you can bring in so many innovative solutions to the justice system at large, step
Yeah.
by step, by just by using AI. Same thing you can do in a law firm. Same thing you can do, for a solo independent practitioner.
Yeah.
So that kind of bridge role would require a lawyer to sit with a tech person, or you get a tech person to learn the law. But if the tech person is going to learn the law from just from a rote learning textbook perspective, that's
Yeah.
not going to really make a lot of sense,
Yeah.
because thinking like a lawyer is a skill which can only be only be put into your mind in a law school, or
Correct.
at least when you are around work around faculty members, or you're getting trained by
Yeah.
good legal minds, then that skill can be used in other professions that you work with. So
Mm.
that was my motivation, and that is my thought with my shift. I don't I don't personally think that there's going to be a very huge surge of lawyers just leaving the law and doing work as
Mm.
the way I am doing currently,
Mm.
because it would require a special interest in working in this kind of a space.
Yeah.
And it also requires you ditching the traditional path, which is sort of structured and set. So there's a predictability factor in it as well.
Yeah.
In this kind of a career trajectory, the predictability quotient is a little less, because I wouldn't
Mm.
say less, but it's not measured the way it's measured in law firms,
Yeah.
or in working in disputes as a lawyer in the litigating space. So it's an unmeasured territory at this
Mm.
point as to how this kind of line of work is going to grow. But it's going to be there because legal tech as a field has always been there. It's just shown itself in different ways.
Mm.
You've had, as I mentioned, that AIR Digest got converted into online
Yeah.
databases
Yeah.
by courts and by private service providers.
Mm.
Uh, Contracts got taken onto Word. You now have different solutions to just manage your documents on your law firm's entire ecosystem. Back
Mm.
then, documents handling of documents would be you physically store them in cupboards.
Yeah.
You wrap it around with a thread, and you write, okay, this is the matter, this is the year, this year to
Yeah.
this year papers are here. Now you can just have all of that scanned and put onto your laptop
Yeah.
or your tablet or mobile device. So, but getting to those solutions have required legal brains to help as well to create
Mm.
those innovative solutions,
Got
those
it.
systems. So that's how I see. And
Yeah.
and definitely it would, there are going to be many more lawyers as mine, as me, who are going to do this kind of a shift
Yeah.
sooner or later. But
Yeah.
it's not going to be a big, the big corporate or the big litigation resignation, and everyone's coming to sit and build AI. That's not going to happen. It's going to
Okay.
be fairly
I
measured in a good way. Yeah.
understood. Understood. So I mean, it's going to be a change, but not something like the Great Resignation or something like that. But I had a different question. So generally everyone who's making the shift, everyone that I'm aware of who's making the shift, is someone from a firm or someone who has experience already in the legal field, who's now going and working in these AI, in these legal tech startups. Do you think there's space for freshers to enter this field? Let's say right out of college, someone feels that they're very interested in tech law and in AI, and they don't have any practical experience of the law, but they're just right out of college. Do you think that there's space in this industry for these sort of students, or is law firm experience or actual legal experience a prerequisite for the legal tech industry?
See, uh, the way I made my switch
Yeah.
would not make me the best person to answer otherwise. But I do feel that straight out of law school, if you are making a switch into legal tech instead of doing a traditional law path, is
Yeah.
also would also be an appreciated move, because
Hmm.
you are still bringing a certain level of legal and academic rigor in your in your skill set,
Yeah.
because you have at least experienced the profession better than those who can just build a software.
Yeah.
So you have an edge already.
Hmm.
uh, I think one portion where such freshers who would make a direct jump into the field,
Hmm.
one sort of gap which can be corrected and should be corrected through different ways, is their actual sort of interaction with those who are on ground.
Yeah.
Uh, Actually understanding a lawyer's pain point in terms of the daily work they do,
Hmm.
then uh, thinking in their shoes as to how we can create a solution. Uh, that is something which they can do with more interactions with lawyers.
Yeah.
You go sit with a lawyer, stay with them for a month or so in their office on a daily basis. You do interactions, you understand, then you're able to bridge that gap. So
Yeah.
initiatives like these can be taken by legal tech companies, and they are always, I mean, interaction with a client for somebody who's providing service is the most important thing. So
Yeah.
I think that is one thing. The other thing is the kind of creative knowledge which the law student would bring to the table. I
Hmm.
believe that that in itself is good enough.
Yeah.
Doesn't require you to sit and do 3 years of law firm or 3 years of litigation to bring that. You can
Yeah.
still identify certain processes. You can still understand how
Hmm.
lawyers think and how they would like a certain thing to
So,
be built for them. A certain product, a certain platform, a certain solution can be
hmm.
built for them. So I just feel that shifting into legal tech blindly without a genuine interest, without a genuine passion to grow in the field,
Yeah.
should not be the ideal way to go about with it. Because a lot of people do jump into a law firm without thinking that do they actually love the corporate side of things or not. They're doing it because there's a certain traditional path which comes with good amount of money, good amount of perks, good amount of prestige.
Yeah.
Same thing with litigation also. Obviously the money comes a little later in litigation, but you still have a set path in some way. So here, if you are jumping in because it's something which is cool to do right now, or something which is the current trend in the field,
Mm.
then I don't think it would be advisable for a fresher to jump in directly.
Yeah.
Do it if you have a genuine interest, then find ways as to how you can interact more with the professionals on the ground,
Yeah.
and then bring your creative ideas to the table. And yeah, obviously you can do phenomenally better than those who are coming in after like 4 5 years of experience also.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's uh, there is no set path, but at the same time there has to be a genuine intent. So
Correct.
I would
Correct.
leave
I
you
mean,
with that. Yeah.
intent and interest matters more than just how much uh, what stage of life you're in. But let's quickly turn to self regulation. Right? So we've hinted about this previously in our conversation as well. So the Bar Council's standard for professional conduct, of course, were framed before these large language models came into existence. This is unlike the US, like you mentioned, where the American Bar Association's formal opinion, 512, um, sets out explicit duties of competence, confidentiality, and supervision for all these different lawyers using generative AI. Now, the regulations that we started off our conversation with, the Supreme Court's draft, for all their detail, don't govern mostly the court as an institution and not the individual advocate on that basis, which of course is also the BCI's mandate. Into that gap, where do you think is a real case for self regulation by the industry? Let's say by the bar associations, by individual firms, or by vendors, or any legal tech company for that matter.
Yeah. So, I am very, I wouldn't say that I am completely pro innovation and there should be no intervention by any regulator at all.
Yeah,
And neither am I on that position, nor am I on the other side of things that, everything has to be sort of regulated on paper and then only can, things happen.
yeah,
Because obviously innovation gets stifled if there is a lot of regulation, and at the same time if there's a complete free hand, then market forces will jump in, and then I think generally those who would want to benefit from a
yeah,
certain product or a certain service would they won't get the correct justice that they require. But
yeah,
in justice in that sense, as in you get value for what you are being provided, and not been given something which is incorrect or something which is wrong.
absolutely.
I'm talking purely from somebody who provides you a service or a tool, in this case a service provider who's giving you a legal AI solution or is creating a legal AI platform for you.
Yeah,
uh, with that being said, see, currently up till now our regulators have not been able to really work with understanding how the technology actually is able to do harm, in the
yeah,
sense that setting a formal piece of regulation that is
yeah,
ensuring that there is a good balance between innovation and restriction on certain capabilities or certain things or certain actions which vendors or providers have to do.
yeah,
That's not been able to, that's not reached yet, primarily because of they're still sort of grappling their head around as to how to put this in check.
yeah,
So I believe that the industry generally is a good enabler for that as a starting point, and then the regulations can follow suit looking at how the industry is functioning. A
mm,
very simple example, and it doesn't sort of really marry directly to how AI and AI enablement has become right now,
yeah,
but the advertising industry, for example,
mm,
there was no law which regulated advertisements had to be published, or how they had to be sort of produced and shown to people in
yeah,
around the country. The industry set their own standards. So okay, there should not be any misleading claims, there should not be any defamatory claims or anything false made. You can use 99.9%, or you say you are India's number one certain company in a certain thing, but you put an asterisk around that. So those came into the law eventually in different ways, but the industry it started regulating itself, and then the law followed suit. So
Mm,
my thought with AI platforms or how AI is being regulated is of a similar thought.
mm,
Let the standards be set first by the industry, and let the law follow after, and let them then set down how a regulatory path should look like.
mm,
Uh, See, because right now at this time in the profession, uh, you know, people have started understanding what the demerits of an AI system are.
absolutely.
You can have false citations generated. We've seen that in so many cases which have reached the courts.
Yeah.
But those are just cases which have reached there because they got mainstream attention because it reached a Supreme Court stage. But
Mm,
just on a regular basis, if you sit and just do a legal research on a general chatbot, you will get wrongly cited answers, or you will get a fabricated output.
mm,
Uh, you will not be able to understand where the AI system has generated this from. So
mm,
the industry is aware about these issues that come with AI systems,
yeah.
and so are the users.
Mm,
So are the lawyers that are purchasing these AI solutions.
yeah.
So, what the industry has done currently is that they are working to create benchmarks,
Mm,
create industry benchmarks. They are working to create, they're holding their company or their outputs accountable against a client or against somebody who's a customer. That you
mm,
can ask us to give you, let's say, an audit trail of what we are, of
mm,
what output you have got. We can show you exactly how we've reached here. You can find the citation to the response as well,
yeah.
something which is a correct law-backed output, law-backed citation.
Mm,
So I'm just giving you a few examples, but the industry generally is doing this currently uh, uh, because the customers are skeptical, are worried, they are not trusting AI. So, in order to build that trust, this
yeah.
exercise is being done. And obviously, this is just not enough. There are obviously more. Confidentiality, for example,
Mm,
uh, uh, is the client's data going to the service provider's infrastructure or their cloud ecosystem?
mm,
And if it's going there, is the data encrypted? It's not being used. So there are obviously some industry standards which service providers follow, get certain certifications, you get
yeah.
compliant, you stay compliant to certain practices as well. And
Mm,
I'm not only pointing towards being compliant to certain laws, but also
yeah.
certain industry standards which are third party regulated. They're not
Mm,
they're independent. They don't have
yeah.
a particular
Not a law
country's
behind it.
there's no law behind it. An ISO certification, for example.
Mm,
Uh, so, a SOC 2 type 2 sort of a certification, for example. So these are industry standards. So they build the trust in the minds of the customer, and then they go ahead and do that kind of a purchase. Uh,
understood.
so once that industry standard is set, that okay, these are the 7 to 10 things which we would do well to
Mm,
ensure that we are not breaching your data confidentiality, we are not giving you wrong outputs, we are servicing you well, we are
yeah.
in your ecosystem, we are doing certain things properly. Once that is done, obviously, we are already seeing legislations like the EU AI Act,
Yeah.
and obviously the ABA has released a formal opinion as well, as you mentioned. So, but what these laws or what the ABA opinion is doing here is that it's sort of repackaging certain already existing duties
Mm,
in the name of AI. So,
yeah.
confidentiality or supervising of what is being used out of an AI tool, the fact that you're able to defend that,
Yeah.
the source behind it, having professional standards around that,
Mm,
of being of dignity in court. So
mm,
those things are already duties of lawyers. Just repackaged it in a formal opinion that okay, AI tools have to, and AI tools being used in law also have to be set to this particular standard,
yeah.
and yeah, and you move ahead with that. So
Mm,
what I'm trying to say out here is that let the industry figure how to serve the customer well,
yeah.
and the regulations can obviously then come in place to keep them in check. So it's a two-step process, and both need each other in certain ways. You cannot have the regulator completely letting the industry set free,
Yeah.
and at the same time, as I said, you cannot let the regulator have a tight sort of whiplash on everything which the service providers would want to do. So let it happen step by step. There's a very interesting piece of legislation. It was the England's Red Flag Act, if I'm getting the name correctly.
Yeah.
Basically, it was for it's a very old 1800s. It was a locomotives based legislation where there would have to be a person with a red flag standing in front of the train,
Yeah.
and they had to give the red flag, they point the red flag at the locomotive operator, and then the train would proceed, and that locomotive operator had to run with the train in the red with the red flag in their hand. Then
Hmm.
only is that train allowed to run. If they don't receive the red flag, they can't run.
Okay.
So eventually that law was repealed because train speeds increased, and they
Hmm.
couldn't have people running with a red flag when the train was running at around 14 to 15 kilometers per hour. Uh, you know, so because of that reason, what that act was repealed. But if you bring that sort of correlation into the AI space,
Yeah.
you start by measured legislation. You start by measured regulation,
Hmm.
and then let the industry sort of do what they're doing. You start small, let the AI systems, let the industry set the standard. You start
Got
small, you go slow, and then you let the industry and the innovation sort of
it. Hmm.
develop eventually. So that's the thought I have around self-regulation of AI tools and
Yeah.
AI platforms or legal tech in general.
Yeah. I mean, it relates to the Porter's hypothesis that there's a sweet spot between regulation and innovation. If you have it too early, then you stifle it. If you have it too late, then you don't know what the effects are going to be. And it's somewhere in the middle where you have to find these ideas like self-regulation, sandbox regulations, and all these different methods in which the innovator and the industry collaborate on some extent, and the industry itself brings these self-regulations out. So I that was a really comprehensive answer, and I just want to close this podcast by asking you a very broad and generic question, but it's something that we've spoken about all throughout the podcast. We've spoken about um, from law students to early career graduates to the industry at large. If I ask you what are two or three things that India needs to get right at this moment when it comes to legal tech and legal AI, what do you think those couple of things could be?
See, if I have to sort of sum this conversation up and give you a few takeaways, it would just be
Yeah,
very simple. One is how we generally approach AI as uh, the Indian legal ecosystem, generally how we look at it.
yeah,
And we also need to start understanding that AI has not created any problems as such in the industry. It's only exposing certain gaps.
hmm,
So when you mentioned the SL judgment at the start, the Pooja
yeah,
case where there was the NCLT, the NCLAT let the judgments go up, and the Supreme Court pointed out that there were fabricated citations and all of that. And then they told the BCI to set a committee up and set
yeah,
professional standards. It's a reactive response to something which could have been avoided uh, two stages before it reached the
yeah,
Supreme Court, where all you required was to verify what the machine generated and then send it out.
hmm,
So, but at the same time, you relied on that machine because it did something faster for you, did something better for you. You trusted that machine's judgment entirely because of what the machine was. You let
yeah,
it go ahead. So, my takeaway, sort of from how I see AI in the legal industry right now, is that you work with it, and
yeah,
at the same time, you let it be a mirror to the issues. Uh,
mm,
a competent counsel or a competent lawyer would have not let that fabricated citation go up. And the same
absolutely.
scenarios we have seen in other countries as well, in the US, in the UK. Courts have, even big law firms have
Yeah,
cited hallucinated judgments. I'm talking about a big law US firm at this point.
yeah,
So they had a memo in which they issued a memo which had a fabricated citation, and then they had to apologize publicly for it.
yeah,
So, you know, you can use AI as an enabler, but at the same time, don't use it as a shortcut.
yeah,
Don't use it as because it's coming with certain promises or it's completing certain things for you in a certain way doesn't mean it takes away your role.
yeah,
And you need to make peace with that fact
yeah,
that it's assistive to you to do certain things. And another thing I see is that from a legal education perspective, that the only way we'll be able to achieve this kind of a mindset which I'm
mm,
talking about right now is by introducing it as early as possible, not as one of the technology solutions
mm,
later on in the years, which can also be relied on when you
yeah,
move into the profession. The earlier you start looking at AI platforms, AI solutions, you start noticing the cracks and the gaps as well, which you as a lawyer have to fill.
mm,
And I'm not here talking about the machine generating something wrong for you as well. Machine can generate a hallucinated answer, which you as a lawyer should definitely spot.
yeah,
But even if you're working with a service provider which is giving you verifiable output, which is giving you audit trails behind your answers, you
mm,
know, and is able to, you're able to sort of hold it accountable. That still, how you're going to use that output creatively in the profession is going to be your personal judgment
yeah,
as a lawyer.
yeah,
So a good machine or a bad machine is it's a moot conversation as long as the lawyer is not good in
mm,
what they do.
yeah,
Then what are the tools they rely on to do their work better is the second conversation we should have.
correct.
So, yeah. So my sort of entire summary of this conversation is just this. And,
Nice.
I'm very hopeful and I'm
Yeah,
very optimistic about how law schools generally will be imbibing AI. We
yeah,
are seeing a lot of, we were seeing law schools across the country, which have, across the globe, and
yeah,
several across the country as well now, which have started doing AI literacy initiatives, not it just being a course module, but putting it in. I just wanted to leave you with one more thought that,
yeah,
how AI can become part of course curriculum is that, for example, deep fakes and AI. It
yeah,
can very well become a course module during evidence law.
mm,
How you spot a deep fake, or how you are able to sort of bring justice to a victim whose deep fakes have been generated. How do you sit and verify that something is AI generated? How you then see what the law behind is. AI
mm,
and copyright, for example, has become a very
yeah, that's
big debate, and it's a very big sort of course module, if you have to call it so to say, for the IPR related courses that we have in college.
yeah,
So it's everywhere there now. Ethics, the legal ethics course that you would have,
mm,
can have a very big module on how ethical AI usage looks like.
yeah,
Not only in terms of prompting, but how much of information you are giving to the machine. If you are using a machine with which you on onto whom you can put clients' confidential information, is that machine, can you hold that machine accountable tomorrow in court? How does that kind of system work?
yeah,
So those are questions and those are thoughts now which students should have when they are, dabbling with AI in the legal field
mm,
alongside the traditional courses that they're learning and they're sort of getting trained for. So, I'm very optimistic to see how things go, and I'm very optimistic to see how junior lawyers will make great use of AI when
yeah.
they step into the to the legal field. So yeah.
Got it, got it. Thank you so much. That was uh, the entire conversation was so, I think, first principle based, where you were really thinking through all these problems at a very fundamental level and above all the gloss that we usually see when we speak about AI. And I mean, your end notes is quite optimistic, and I share that optimism with you. That ultimately, it's the lawyer's skills and critical thinking that matter. You can use any tool, you can put them whenever they want, but if you're a smart lawyer, you're a smart lawyer. The tools, they're just an add-on to your way of functioning within the law. And but that does not remove the fact that legal education should mandatorily have some sort of AI inclusion from the very beginning on what responsible AI adoption looks like, how does it change the practice going further, and of course, the case that you make for self regulation sits at the very heart of this conversation. So, thank you so much for taking out the time to come to this podcast and share your thought. It was an incredible experience having you here.
Thank you so much for having me.